Robbie, for this time of the year, what needs to be the focus? I'm not talking just Iowa, but for any team as the tournament looms.
Yeah, it's tough because you do have some teams who are kind of eliminated. And I guess the good thing about college basketball for now, it will be different next year in the Big Ten, is that even the teams that are towards the bottom still do technically have a chance of getting as hot as possible and winning, what is it now, five games to make yourself into the NCAA tournament. It's not likely, it's improbable, but at least there is the sliver of hope. And we kind of saw with Ohio State last year on the men's side where they got all the way to the semis. Now, they looked so tired in the semifinal game, and rightfully so. But I do think that even for the teams at the top, this is a hard time of year because you understand what's coming. The best time of the year is right around the corner. The things that you have been building for since August and September are right there. But these games are still very important. And I look at on the men's side, like Nebraska, Northwestern, those are two teams that still have so much to play for. And you feel the excitement of postseason play, but you have to close it down to make sure you play in the postseason that you want to. So it's very challenging. I remember this time as a player, like the coaches would always say, these are the dog days of February. That's a very real thing. And whether your team is in last place or in first place, there's something to be said about that. And it's on the veteran guys. It's on the coaches. Like, you have got to keep your guys locked in because it's easy to look ahead and say, man, the Big Ten tournament's pretty cool. The NCAA tournament's pretty cool. And it's a struggle at this time of year for that.
It's also really important to rest this time of year and understanding as a coach, like when to push, when to pull. Had it been Ohio State, Maryland this weekend, like Maryland didn't even take a shoot around just because it's one of those times of year where you probably now at this point have a limited bench just because of injuries and things that naturally occur over the course of a season. And it's just important to give players rest as much as possible. And on the flip side of this, where you have the teams that are trying to stay focused and, potentially have an opportunity for those who already are in, like Ohio State and the women's side clinched at least a share of the Big Ten title regular season yesterday with a win. And they're the number one seed in the tournament, but they're like, we haven't clinched the whole entire conference yet. Like, just a share, we're not going to celebrate that yet because we still have an opportunity out there. I think that's a fantastic mindset. And it's also a scary mindset because they know that they have unfinished business and they don't feel like they've achieved anything. So it goes both ways where, yes, you have to maintain that focus and like be excited about certain things ahead. But also you have some teams that are like, we still haven't proved enough yet this season.
Obviously college and the NBA differ so much, but this is to me like one of the biggest differences. Like, you have an Ohio State, right, on the women's side that's already clinched that number one seed. Robbie, obviously you haven't clinched the title outright, but that number one seed, like in the NBA, you might not care if you lose your last two conference games.
Right.
In college though, like, what's the impact if you've already clinched the seed you want in the tournament, dropping the last couple conference games to teams that are not going to make the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, that's catastrophic for your NCAA tournament resume. That's where you look at that. And I guess the good thing is the worst loss you could probably take is quad 2 on the men's side because of where the net rankings fall. I think a home loss to because Indiana's around 100. I'm trying to think who Michigan is around like 110. I think that's still a quad 2 loss, which doesn't kill you, but it's still not good. You're trying to avoid those if you can. They might be quad 3. I'd have to look at the numbers there. But it's just you're playing for momentum. The NBA is different because you're playing so many games. And at the end of the day, once you get locked in, you're locked in. Whereas like they're still look at it as like a sliding scale almost of, well, you lost these two at the end of the year. This is a quad 3 loss, quad 2 loss, whatever. It dings you. You're not locked in just by your record. So it's very important. The NBA is a different beast all to itself. And like I've been on a team there where we were eliminated from the playoffs in like January. and think about how hard it is to be eliminated when there's just a month ago, nonetheless 3 months to go. So it can be a different beast there, and it can be an unforgiving place.
Let's go down the list on either side, men's and women's. How many teams from the Big Ten deserve a spot in the well, let me take deserve out because that's a longer list. Do you think realistically are going to be in the tournament? Robbie, you start.
For the men, I think it's 6. I think it will be Purdue. I think Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan State, although they are not finishing strong.
I mean, by a thread. How about that?
Yeah, they are. They are. That was an incredible shot by Dale Bonner in just a crazy game. Not a well-played game, but it was a grinder of a game. And I do think Northwestern is in good shape. They still have unfinished business. I think Nebraska, same thing. Big win for them last night against Minnesota. Iowa is intriguing. They do have opportunities. A missed opportunity in Champaign on Saturday, but they still have Illinois at home. They've got Northwestern on the road, have to beat Penn State, which I believe is a home game for them. But they are playing better. And if they make some noise in the conference tournament, they could have something to say about that. But I think 6 is the number. 7 would mean that Iowa really played well here in the last couple weeks of the season.
Okay, that's good. With that 7, you'd be at half. Megan, women.
Yeah, I think it's very similar on the women's side in terms of I think 6 are a lock at this point with Ohio State. And on the women's side, the top 16 teams or the top 4 seeds get to host the first and second rounds of the NCAA tournament. So there's even a greater luster. We talk about once you win, you do not want to lose. Even though Ohio State's a 1 seed, they're likely locked in as a team that's going to host the tournament. But for like an Iowa or an Indiana, especially, who's trying to lock down a host spot, like you cannot lose games moving forward. But you have Ohio State, Iowa, Indiana will likely host the first and second rounds of the tournament. Nebraska beating Iowa, I think, pretty much punched its ticket into the NCAA tournament. Michigan, to me, has a huge win over Ohio State. It's the Buckeyes' only loss of the season in conference play. So that, to me, I think they've done enough to maybe get in. Michigan State, I think, has done enough to get in. So those are kind of my top 6 right there. And then the 7th potentially being, I need to look at a list of all the teams, but I think Maryland, I would say 7. I think Maryland's an NCAA tournament team. So I'd say 7 should get in. Maryland's done. They're playing a lot better right now. They have some wins early on in the season. Like they beat Syracuse earlier this year, who's killing it now in the ACC. They picked up along the way. They've done well in the month of February. So those types of things, they don't have a bad loss on their resume. I think you get 7 in. And then maybe that 8th spot is just going to depend on what Illinois does. And Penn State, unfortunately, like if you asked me this a month ago, I'd say they would get in. They've lost every game in the month of February so far. So Taylor Valladay goes down and they've kind of lost their identity as a team. So we'll see what happens down the stretch, but I would say like about 7 are probably locks to get in at this point.
Okay. And before we get to more tournament talk, of course, we got we've got the Ohio State and Michigan game, which will be a rematch. You said, Michigan is the only team to beat them in conference play. Let's look even farther ahead, though. Okay? Ohio State, Iowa, Robbie. This is on the women's side at Iowa.
Revenge game.
Revenge game.
A court storming revenge.
That's right. There's a lot on the line here. A lot on the line.
Yeah. Okay, besides a rivalry and like being a really good game, implications for the tournament. I'm talking NCAA tournament. Does it affect things?
I mean, I guess it could if they're on like the same seed line, I suppose. I don't know if they are. I haven't looked at their resumes. So
right now, Ohio State's 2 and Iowa's 6. So I don't.
Yeah, then I wouldn't think so. Other than it just being a great storyline and a great game. I think that's what we're looking for.
True. And losing at Iowa is not a bad loss at all. That shouldn't impact anything. And it wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State goes in statistically as an underdog, according to Vegas. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Cover Hawkeye's tough.
It's so hard to play there. I mean, Zora, you've been there. You've practically have to report it on your taxes as a place of residency at this point this season. But it's going to be a fabulous game, a lot of fun. College game day is going to be there. Like it's going to be a blast and a half.
I was just thinking if they were both like up for a 1 seed.
Right. Ohio State is.
They were like going head to head.
Iowa's not though. No. Ohio State.
Iowa looks like what, a 2 or a 3?
2 or 3.
Mm. Yeah.
And they were 2 last year, right? 2 or 3?
They were a 2 last year.
2. Okay.
And then they didn't have to play Stanford because Stanford got knocked out as the 1 seed in their region by Ole Miss.
Always helps when that bracket opens up.
Always, which I think we're going to have a lot of.
For the squad.
Women's basketball is so good on the women's side this year. The leagues are so good across like Power 5 and even like the mid-major conferences are stacked.
Yeah.
Well, I think the parity too. Like I think about when we were in college and it was like, all right, UConn, Notre Dame, Stanford, and maybe a couple other teams. But like the parity now seems like it's as good as it's ever been.
Yeah. Like, don't be surprised on the women's side, like Gonzaga, like if they're a Sweet 16 team, that should not be shocking to anybody. They're killing it. Fairfield in the MAC has lost one game this season. Oh, not just they went undefeated in conference, but they've lost one game overall.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy.
Crazy.
It's hard to do. I don't care what conference you're in. Like that's
Yeah.
so difficult to do game in and game out.